Before Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory became the state of Oklahoma, the U.S. government's efforts to assimilate Indians included efforts to virtually punish the native languages out of the children at boarding schools, such as the Fort Sill Indian School. But many secretly kept their languages, spoke their languages, and became what would become known as code talkers. Those included the older brother of Ronald Red Elk.
I never did know until, like many Americans didn't find out until the French came over and honored the remaining 3 code talkers that were still alive. And Dick had never talked about his war experiences, and it was later found out that that material was classified, and they were instructed not to do so. And like a good soldier, they followed their orders.
Eventually, the code talkers started talking. Dick Red Elk later relayed that the 13 Comanches stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia, and others worked on code words for weapons and aircraft. Hutu in Comanche is a bird that flies. That naturally became airplane. Other Comanche words were then coded to describe specific aircraft, such as cargo planes, fighters, and bombers. So much of the Comanche coding was done before the D-Day landings. According to Smithsonian Institution records, Dick Red Elk became one of General George Patton's personal radio men. Following World War II, he was among the code talkers to return home with hopes of restoring the native languages. And Red Elk started the Comanche Language and Cultural Preservation Committee, and the work is carried on by Dick's little brother, Ronald.
In the summer of 1942, England was being devastated by German air raids, and it was running out of oil. There had been little domestic petroleum exploration in the UK when foreign supplies resumed after the First World War. A petroleum engineer named Philip Southwell proposed that Britain's own little-known oil fields be tapped, and he was sent to the colonies to buy equipment. He found out in Washington that U.S. drilling equipment could not be purchased by foreigners, and eventually he wound up in Ardmore, Oklahoma, at the home of oilman Lloyd Noble. Southwell, Noble, and representatives of the Fane Porter Drilling Company of Oklahoma City came up with a plan to send both men and equipment to England. Noble tapped an assistant superintendent named Eugene Rosser to head up the project. Rosser secretly recruited 43 other Roughnecks, mostly Oklahomans, bought supplies and equipment, and headed for England. Only after arriving in February of 1943 did they learn the location of Britain's secret oil fields, an area known as Duke's Wood. The Roughnecks were boarded with monks at the Anglican monastery of Kellam Hall. They drilled 106 wells over the course of a year, and they're credited with adding more than 1 million barrels of crude to the war effort. They are remembered with a monument, a statue called the Oil Patch Warrior, which stands to this day at the Duke's Wood Nature Reserve near Nottingham, an area known historically as Sherwood Forest. July 5th, 1943. World War II had been underway for a year and a half. There was perhaps no place on earth farther from the fighting than the Oklahoma Panhandle, and there was no indication that Boise City, the seat of Oklahoma's westernmost county, was about to get into the war. It was the Cimarron County Courthouse that was the cause of the battle, well, that and a lost bomber crew. At just about midnight, a B-17 bomber rumbled off the runway at the Army Air Base in Dalhart, Texas, 45 miles south. The crew had orders to bomb the practice range at Conlin, Texas. At about 12:30, when the crew spotted the 4 lights on the 4 sides of the Cimarron County Courthouse, they knew they'd found their target and dropped 6 bombs on it. Time magazine later reported the citizens acted as most civilians who have never been bombed before. They ran like hell, in no particular direction. The attack might have gone on longer if a power company employee hadn't had the presence of mind to pull the master switch and plunge the entire town into an involuntary blackout. The practice bombs dropped that night contained very little explosive, and the raid was mostly described in terms of what was almost damaged. One bomb fell near an apartment where a family was sleeping. Another just missed the west wall of the First Baptist Church. But some of the bombs, and even some of the craters, are preserved to this day as a reminder of that hot July night when Boise City became the only town in the continental United States to be bombed during World War II.